everyone! Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Remarkable Spirit Memories of a Medium. My name is Gabrielle Gardner, and I am a medium. That means that I see, feel, and hear the souls of those who are no longer residing in a physical body, or in more traditional terms, those who have died. Death, as I have come to know it, most definitely is not the end. It is simply the turning of a page after completing a chapter. Now today's episode is going to be a whole lot different than any of the ones that came before this one, and I am super excited. The spooky season is upon us, and it's my favorite time of year, if you cannot tell. And so I thought, what better way to celebrate than to share with you some of my spookiest experiences with spirit. Most of what I see in spirit is high and bright and light and heavenly and angelic and beautiful and light. However, I do occasionally see some of the darker side of spirit. I just choose not to focus as much energy on that, and that's just a personal choice. So now that the air is crisp and there's red and yellow leaves and pumpkins are being carved, and you may end up feeling a little tingly feeling on the back of your spine, which is in fact a spirit sign, and as a medium I'm here to tell you that that is a very real sensation. The energy this time of year is just a little bit different. So why don't you grab your favorite candy and some hot apple cider and join me as I share my 7 spookiest experiences with spirit. Number 7, Voices of the Dead. It's a very dramatic title. So this is the only one on the countdown that is not just one specific experience, it is 3 that I have had. There's never going to be a time in this work in which a disembodied voice coming just as loud and as clear as yours or mine, emanating from the darkness, that will never not be terrifying. So the first time that scared the out of me this year was I was walking between the living room and a dining room in our house, which makes it infinitely more terrifying, and I heard and felt this voice, so I literally felt the breath on the back of my neck, and it was a man's voice that whispered, "See me," full-on horror movie style, and it scared me so bad that I ended up having to call my mom to calm me down. Second one that scared me in our own home was in our basement, and it emanated from the dark back corner, as it always does, and it was a loud man's voice that said multiple words in multiple sentences. It was so long and clear, and I ran up the stairs Scooby-Doo style and would not go back down for 3 days. The third one actually is not a disembodied voice, it is an EVP, which is an electronic voice phenomenon. So you don't hear it with your ears, it's captured on a voice recording. And we were doing these recordings in a home that was very active for multiple weeks, and we ended up getting like 7 or 8 distinct voices coming through. But the one that creeped me out the most was we heard a child's voice very clearly. There were no children in the home, at all during that time. And it was an intelligent voice that was speaking directly to a dog in the home, and it even named the dog. It said the dog's name. And so I was not emotionally prepared for that, and it creeped me out. So those are the scariest spirit sounds I've heard so far. Number 6, the Salem, Massachusetts nightmare. So this one is a little hard to explain, but it was a shared experience that I had with my mom, and shared spirit experiences just provide a lot of validation. And my family and I love going back to New England to celebrate this time of year, and if you've been to Salem, Massachusetts, it's one of those things, if you know, the energy there is palpable, and I love it. But so we were, if I remember right, we were there in about 2010, and my mom and I had gone into a witchy shop in the older historic part of the town, and the shop was lovely. It was full of crystals and herbs and brooms and, all of the things. It felt great, but then a woman came out from the back of the store, and it was immediately clear that she had dark energy around her. Now I want to say this is not at all common in Salem. It is, everybody there is lovely. This was different, and this energy that was with her was powerful, and I do believe that she had an attachment that she actually was aware of, and that she used this to gain power over others. And so we sensed this immediately, and it was heavy, and we didn't feel like we wanted to even have our back to her, so we left right away. Thought it was over. And then where it gets really strange is that night my mom and I could not sleep at all in our hotel room, and it was creepy, it creeps me out thinking about it. We woke up that next morning and I told her that I'd had these terrible nightmares, and she had had nightmares as well, and through talking about it, we had had the same exact nightmares, and they were incredibly strange. I would say actually stereotypical kind of culty images that flashed by of figures in hoods and like a hill with an orange sky behind it, and other images I won't describe, but it was terrifying to know that it felt like these images had been planted. I think it was just to mess with us, but it was a very scary experience, and I will never forget it. And it actually took a few weeks for us to get these images out of our mind, and it just never feels good to have control over what is placed into your consciousness. Number 5, the hotel lurker. So while on another trip back to New England with my family, we love going back there again. We go all through Massachusetts and Vermont and New Hampshire and Rhode Island and all the way up to Maine sometimes, and we love stopping for the fresh pressed cider and the hot apple donuts, and it's lovely, but there is a lot of spiritual energy in some of these older towns that is unlike what we have here on the West Coast. And so this one scares me to talk about because it has not left me, but we were in an older hotel in a small town in Connecticut. I'm not going to share where because I don't think people should be going to check this one out. And the moment we crossed the threshold of this room, the energy felt dark, it felt heavy, it felt oppressive. Again, this is not at all common for me. I don't feel these things very often. And it just felt wrong. And so we left, went and did some things throughout the day. And when we came back at night, it was a whole different ball game. This energy actually felt aggressive. It felt like it did not want us there. It was unwelcoming. Still at that point, could not tell what it was. And then I was told that it was time to go to bed, and I was not excited about that. And there was a mirror at the foot of my bed on the wall that was not great. If you don't know, spiritual energy actually can come and go through mirrors, and that was the case in this room, is that things were coming and going. But it was the other strange thing about this experience that I've never had again, is that the entire energy in that room had a sound to it that sounded like white noise, and every few minutes it would kind of change octaves, and you could literally feel this, like your body would feel static, or it would, and this wasn't EMF. I'm fairly familiar with EMF. This was different. It was just, there was weird energy in that room. And so in the middle of the night, around 2 a.m., I was hiding essentially under the covers, and I felt something come in by the foot of my bed, and I rolled over, and sure enough, there was a pitch black, dark figure, darker than the black room, standing there at the foot of my bed, and it felt, I would say it felt like it wanted to do harm. It was very dark, and I was so scared. And I turned back over and flipped the light on, and of course the figure was gone at that point. But you better believe I slept with the lights on and the TV on the rest of the night, and I still have no idea what that was. My only guess is that it may be a shadow person, which is something I don't know much about, but a lot of people do. And I just, again, choose not to put my energy into that side of spirit work. But I was out of there pretty much at sunrise. So, hotel lurker, that was a big old nope. Number 4, the mimicking demon. So, as I've said before, the majority of spirit work that I do is high and bright and light, but occasionally I do have these experiences with the darker side of spirit, and this is the first of 3 experiences I will be telling you about with what my guides have said is a demonic entity. And I will share really quickly what my guides have said about them. And they have shared that they are inhuman entities that have never lived a human life and have never walked earth in human form. They have malicious intentions and do work to cause harm. They resonate at an extremely low vibration and feed off of low vibration energies in the earth plane, like fear, pain, depression, and anger. Lack of self-worth, rage, and fear are common emotions felt among those who experience demonic activity. And because these intense negative emotions are essentially their food source, they do everything they can to create more of that level of energy. So again, don't mess around with that stuff. I personally believe that sharing images of demonic entities through words is not wise, so I won't be describing them. I'm just going to share the experience that I had. So this one was while I was in a home with a fellow spirit worker. We were doing a cleansing and blessing, and immediately I could tell that this was one of the most powerful energies that I have ever encountered, and it was it had a foreboding energy as soon as we walked in this house. And I first saw this entity take the form of a small child, which they will do to try to gain confidence, to try to manipulate you, to essentially gain trust so that you believe they are not a threat and so that they can take up space in your home for longer. But so I saw this thing taking the form of a child in the stairwell of the basement. Scary. And it just got worse from there, and this blessing was incredibly challenging, and this thing had so much power behind it. And one of the things that this mimicking, I call it almost a species, it's a subspecies, they mimic things, and it causes extreme confusion, and both she and I were having this to the point where we could not even remember what stage of the blessing we were on. We could not remember, we have prayers and sayings that we say and we know by heart, and they were gone. We could not remember them, and then even reading them off a page, it was jumbled and garbled as it came out. So this thing it really could kind of sink itself into your mind, and that definitely puts it in the top 7. But then when it got really intense at one point, and I was actually having chest pain and she was having lower back and kidney pain, so we went outside to regroup, and it was around midnight, and we were looking up, I remember, at the sky, trying to just kind of get ourselves grounded, like back in our body and back to the earth. And she looked up towards the living room window, which was like a big bay window there, and she saw what looked like the woman who owned the house standing in the window there looking out at us. And I could tell that she was incredibly freaked out by that, and that's a lot of power for something to be able to imitate to that level of specificity, somebody that you know. And so we had to really call on our resources there, and we went back in and were able to complete the process. But nope, I don't like it. So that was absolutely, this mimicking demon was one of the most terrifying experiences that I have had with spirit. Number 3, the demon in the desert. So this encounter was exceptionally frightening because I just stumbled upon it by accident. I was not going into a home or onto the land to do a blessing or cleansing. Again, I was on a family road trip vacation, which I have no idea. Maybe I need to stop traveling because these things happen. But we were out in the middle of the desert. And again, I'm not going to share where this was because nobody did anything to shift this. So I believe it is still there as we found it. And it is an ancient energy that has been there, and it is tied to the land, and it's in a very secluded kind of rural, or not even a rural, it's in the desert in California. And what was fascinating is that not too far away was a very old mission, and so the backdrop of a mission with a demon outside the RV made for quite the night. And anyway, so I do believe that this was a very ancient energy that attracted violence to the land, bloodshed to the land, illness, and that's just something that you don't want to mess around with. So we were there, and obviously we could not sleep well. It felt like this thing was draining our energy. It was making us sick. It was making us afraid. It planted really scary images in my mind of like zombie people standing around, which I knew it was just doing as a scare tactic, which worked. I was terrified. And but yeah, throughout the night we heard scratching sounds around, and I got a psychic image of it on the side of the RV, and so it was real scary. And this thing was big and powerful, and again, its appearance was very monster-like, I will say. And so those images have never gone away from me, and we left there real quick, again, right at sunrise. So demon in the desert, big ol' nope. Number 2, the demon in the attic crawl space. Again, a dramatic title, but 100% accurate. So this one was super intense. A woman in the home had been physically harmed by this entity, which was shocking to me, and she had had a string of what could be called just bad luck events, but it was more this entity and energy was really affecting her life. And so as soon as we again crossed the threshold into this house, the energy was just something that you would not believe. It was heavy and oppressive, and it felt the air was thick to breathe, and it permeated to like every corner of the home. And I have never felt anything like it in a house ever, and have not since, thankfully. But this thing, again, was very powerful. And when I was doing the psychic sweep, I could immediately see that this thing hung out in like an attic crawl space that had a little door to it, because why wouldn't it? What else could be scarier, right? And so we did the first process of this cleansing. It went well. And then we got up to the second story where this door is, and it just got more and more aggressive, and it felt like rage, and it was just pushing back incredibly hard, which a lot of times when you start going through this, they kind of back off at a certain stage, and this one never did. It was just 100% like in it for the fight. And as we brought out holy items and used prayer, it got incredibly aggressive, and it growled. And when you hear the growling sound, that's a sound that makes you want to leave real quick. And so we did. We went out and regrouped for a moment. And we, when we went back in, though, there's the other thing that this one did that I've never seen before is that it would like crouch in a corner, and you could see it crouched in the corner, and then it would instantly be standing like on the other side of the room, so it could jump places. And I've never seen one that could do this kind of movement. And it was really scary to see that something had that ability to just kind of jump spots in the home. And again, very large, presented itself as about 8 feet tall and monster-like, so I didn't like that staring at me from the darkness of this attic. But so there was a stage in the blessing where I threw salt in. And when I threw salt in, the salt all flew right back out at me with a whole lot of force. And it, chills, scares me. This thing was strong, and it threw the salt back out, and I had to really fight my way through this process to get through it. And we did, but don't mess around with this side of spirit, guys. There's no reason for it. And yep, so everything in this, the woman being injured by this entity, and the energy in that home, and the salt being thrown back, all put this at number 2. It was close to number 1, but super scary. All right, so I feel like now is a good time to add in an honorable mention. It almost made the top 7 countdown, just missed it. And this experience was when I was home alone here in our house. And this was before I met my guide, so a lot of my experiences with spirit were very much ghosty and paranormal in style. I was hearing, footsteps and seeing shadows and all of that, so it was just overall scarier at that time. But at this night, I was at home. Again, I was in college. I was studying for a test, I remember, and I was sitting at my desk, and I kept seeing a shadow figure move in the hallway. And it got more and more forceful in nature, in that it was coming closer and closer to my doorway, and it was making noises, and it finally got to be so much that I was scared enough that I got our dogs and I left the house, and I drove over to my grandparents' house, who lived just about 15 minutes away. But I didn't want to be here until the rest of my family got back. And so around midnight, my dad and I came back, and we were doing a walkthrough of the house, and we saw that the storm window in my bedroom had been ripped off. It looked like it had been ripped off by a crowbar. And so we realized that someone had tried to break into our house that night. And this was too much of a spirity coincidence. I now, looking back, believe that this spirit in the hallway was actually a helper, a friendly spirit, soul energy, trying to get me out of the house so I wasn't here when someone tried to break in. It was just too much of a coincidence. The first and only night that I left because I was so scared, and the only night that it looks like there's ever been an attempted break-in in our house. So I am, in fact, still creeped out by the experience, but I'm very grateful to that spirit. Number 1, the hotel horror. Now this one creeps me out more than any other, and I actually had to make notes on it because my memory is so fuzzy on the order of events of this one, and I still to this day have absolutely no idea what was going on here, and I'm still scared about what went on here. So again, on another trip out of state, and I was with my mom, and we were in New Orleans. And like Salem, if you know, the energy in New Orleans is just different, especially down in those really, the historic parts of the town, and which is where we had spent the night before, this experience taking place. My mom and I had walked around, we'd enjoyed the town, had a great time. And we got back that night, we were super exhausted, so we just kind of crashed out. And I knew that my mom had to be up really early for a business trip. So here's where it gets weird. So I woke up and I heard the hairdryer going in the bathroom, and I heard noises in the bathroom of this hotel room. And I assumed that it would be my mom getting ready, and I tried to roll over to look, but I was in sleep paralysis. So I've only had this happen twice, and that in itself is terrifying enough. I had it once here in our house when I was younger, and then in this hotel room in New Orleans. But so I couldn't move, and but I could see the alarm clock on the bedside table, and it said that it was 11:35. And in my freaked out, sleep paralysis state, I was like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because my mom would be gone already. She had to be out at like 8. And so I tried to make myself relax so that I could get out of it, and that actually happened really quickly. And I got up, and once it wore off, I got up and I ran over to the bathroom area, and the hairdryer was down on the floor on. And so I flipped it off, and when I flipped it off, I heard noise out in the other part. So this room was divided with like the bedroom and bathroom on one side and the doorway, and then there was the living room and kitchenette area out there. And I heard noise out there, and I looked up that way, and there was like slats on the doorway, or on the door, and I looked and saw for sure movement through this doorway. And at that point, I still was actually concerned that there could just be a real person in the room with me. And so I ran back over to the table to grab my cell phone, and my cell, of course, horror movie going on in real life, said that it had no service. And I didn't know what to do. And so I was trying to, keep myself together, guys. I'm scared telling this story because it creeped me out. And I realized then it was like there were different parts of this where things just started to sink in, and I realized that the room looked too dark. And so I went over, and there were those sunshade, the sun blocking curtains, and I pulled them back. It scares me. And it was nighttime outside, and it was dark out. And it didn't make sense at all. It made no sense. And I was like, well, if I'm having this terrible nightmare and it's nighttime, my mom should be here. But it was obviously dark. And so I pulled the shades back, and I was looking out this window trying to figure out what was going on, and the hairdryer behind me flipped back on. And so I'm so scared. And I ran back over, and I turned the hairdryer off. And right when I turned the hairdryer off, I heard whispering voices. It sounded like two voices whispering behind me. And then what's really creepy about this, my memory cuts right there. And I don't remember anything after that in that room. And so then the next thing I remember is waking up out on the couch in the living room, and I was in sleep paralysis again out on the couch. And then I could hear these two voices whispering behind me. I'm gonna cry. This is so scary. And I heard these two voices whispering behind me, and I had to like get out of the sleep paralysis, and I couldn't. And that's where that memory cuts. And then the next thing I remember is waking up back in the bedroom, in the bed, and I jumped up. Thankfully I wasn't in sleep paralysis, and the clock said that it was 9:26. I still remember this so clearly. It said it was 9:26 a.m. And so I got dressed really fast, and I literally grabbed my phone and ran out of the room and ran down the hallway, down the elevator, and went out to the outdoor pool deck. And that's where I stayed for 7 hours until my mom got back from her meeting. And I was too scared to go back up. And then, so we could chalk this all up to nightmares, but then what's really scary is that we went back up to that room, and there was bedding on the couch, as if I had made a couch bed that she said was not there, even though on this go around I'd woken up in the bed in the bedroom. And then the hairdryer was lying on the floor in the bathroom. My voice is trembling, it's fine. The curtains were pulled back, which she said she had left closed so I could sleep, and then we both had full cell reception in the room. And so I have no idea what went on there, and it scares me to think about it, and so you better believe I will never be going back to that hotel room again. Well, I hope you all had a spooktacular time listening to all of my nightmare-inducing experiences with spirit. Please use your brain and listen to your intuition, and just don't mess around with the darker side of spirit. There's no good that comes from it. It's never worth it. Just leave it alone. So, this Halloween season, do some spiritual, cleansing instead, and while the veil is thin, toss out your Ouija boards and just stick to the spirit guides and angels. I hope that hearing these spooky stories was just enough to put you in the mood for some, haunted hay rides and corn mazes, and hopefully you'll be passing out candy to little superheroes and monsters on Halloween night. So thank you for joining me, and my name is Gabrielle Gardner, and this has been another episode of Remarkable Spirit. Please join us again next time to see how Remarkable Spirit is all around us.